They told her not to speak, but every silence feels like a scream trapped inside her throat. It's desperate to break free. In a house where words can kill and silence is survival, Mara must play the quiet game, a deadly test of will, fear, and loss. Because one whispered word could cost her everything, and silence might be the only thing keeping her alive. The first time Mara heard about the quiet game, it sounded like nothing more than a strange childhood challenge. Don't speak, don't make a sound, don't even breathe too loudly. It's easy enough. She thought that was before she moved into the house on Hollow Pines Road. It had been her aunt's once. Aunt Evelyn, reclusive, quiet, more miffed than family. When Evelyn passed, the house was left to Mara, a reluctant inheritance that came with more questions than gratitude. A creaking Victorian on the edge of a dying forest, with boarded windows and thick ivy that gripped the wood like a hand refusing to let go. Mara should have sold it, but something had pulled her back to it. Maybe it was the recent breakup. Maybe it was the need to disappear for a while. The letter had been waiting for her on the foyer table, cream-colored envelope. Name written in shaky cursive. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Mara, if you're reading this, then I've gone. There's nothing left here for you but one rule. Don't speak inside this house. No matter what you hear, no matter who you think you see, stay silent. It's not a game. It never was. Evelyn, she laughed then. It's an uncomfortable, breathy chuckle that echoed too loud in the empty hall. The next moment, the chandelier above her rattled just slightly, enough to make her stop laughing. Mara set the letter down and began exploring the house. The air was heavy, as though the walls were holding in decades of breath. The floors groaned under her every step. Mirrors hung in every hallway, tall and antique, many of them clouded with age. One had a long vertical crack down the center, like it had been split open by a scream. In the upstairs bedroom, the one that must have been Evelyn's, there was a small notebook on the nightstand. Inside were pages and pages of scrawled handwriting. Each one was filled with rules. No speaking after sundown, no humming, no music. Don't answer if you're called by name. Don't read aloud. Don't pray, especially not out loud. The last rule was underlined 3 times in red ink. Never break the silence. There were symbols drawn in the margins. Strange looped figure. A circle with a vertical slash. A tiny mouth with stitches across it. Mara felt her stomach twist as she turned the pages. Was her aunt just mad? Later that night, Mara tried to brush it all off. Superstitions. The ramblings of an old, isolated woman. She made herself dinner, microwaved leftovers from a gas station stop, and opened her laptop to check her emails. But the internet was dead. No signal, no network. She reached for her phone. Same, she told herself, it was just the remote location. She could always drive to town in the morning and get everything sorted. As the sun sank below the forest line, the shadows in the house grew darker, more solid. The chandelier stopped rattling. Instead, the floorboards began to creak again. She wasn't walking. She was in the kitchen, sitting perfectly still. Creak, creak. The sound was rhythmic, like someone pacing on the floor above her. Back and forth, step, step, step. She glanced at the ceiling. The bedroom, no. She refused. To be that girl, the one who hears a noise and goes to investigate? Not tonight. Instead, she turned on the TV. Static. Only static. She tried changing the channel. It's nothing but white fuzz and the low hiss of unfiltered noise. Then over the static a voice, barely audible. Mara. She froze. Mara. It said again, clearer this time. A voice she didn't recognize. Not Evelyn's. Not anyone's. She grabbed the remote and shut it off. The silence that followed was worse. She sat in the quiet, her ears straining for any other sound. Mara. It came again, not from the TV, from upstairs. A whisper. Mara clutched the edge of the table and stood slowly. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. But her body was trembling. Then the voice said something new. Say something. That was enough. She grabbed her phone, her keys, and bolted for the front door. It wouldn't open. She turned the lock, yanked the knob, pounded with her fists. Nothing. It wouldn't budge, as if the house had shifted. Sealing her inside, panicked, she shouted, "Help!" The moment the word left her mouth, everything changed. The air snapped cold. The walls shivered. The chandelier above her dropped 2 inches before catching on its chain and swinging. It's like a pendulum somewhere deep within the house. Something moved. She backed away from the door, her breath now fast and shallow. The silence had returned, but it was no longer empty. It was dense, watchful. She could feel eyes on her, not behind her, and above her. Inside her that night, she slept on the couch with the lights on and her mouth shut. When morning came, she didn't speak. She didn't even hum when she brushed her teeth. The next day, Mara found something new. A small recorder hidden under a floorboard in the upstairs bedroom. A cheap handheld device with a cracked screen. She hit play. A woman's voice came through. Day 43. I heard it again last night. Calling me, begging. It sounds like my sister, but it's not her. It used her voice. It used her name. I almost answered. Almost said something. But I didn't. I remembered the rules. I remembered what happened to him. There was a long pause, then a whisper. The house doesn't want silence. It demands it. Mara stopped the recording. Her hand trembled as she clicked it off. She understood now. This was not a haunted house in the traditional sense. No moaning ghosts or rattling chains. This house listened, waited. It tested, and all it wanted was for her to speak. The morning after she screamed, Mara expected to wake 2 blood-smeared walls or whispers dripping from the ceiling, but everything was quiet. Too quiet. The silence was no longer empty. It was taut, like the air had been stretched, and left on the brink of snapping. The kind of silence that clung to her skin, nestled behind her ears, and breathed shallowly over her shoulder. She moved through the house like she was underwater, careful not to bump furniture or let her footsteps echo too loudly. The fear was no longer a sharp stab in the chest. It had become a dull, persistent throb in her throat. Warning her not to open her mouth again, Mara avoided mirrors. No. Not just because of the cracked one in the hallway or the dusty one in the guest bedroom, but because she swore last night she saw herself blink late, half a second after she had already turned away, as if something was watching her reflection and hadn't caught up in time. She made coffee in silence, skipping her usual hum of morning tunes. Even the sound of the spoon clinking against the mug made her flinch. The house didn't punish sound. Immediately, waited. and that waiting was somehow worse. At 9:47 a.m., her phone rang. The screen lit up with the name, Mom. Mara's breath caught in her chest. She hadn't spoken to her mom in 2 weeks, not since the funeral. She wanted to answer. She needed to answer. Maybe her mother could talk her down, remind her that the world made sense, that this was just grief twisting her mind, but Evelyn's warning echoed in her head. Don't answer if you're called by name. Her finger hovered over the green icon. Then the ringtone changed. At first, it was still her usual chime. Then it slowed, stretched, distorted. It began to moan. Mara. She dropped the phone, heart pounding. The screen went black. The name Mom was gone instead. Just a blank space and a call time. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 1 second. The call had answered itself. She snatched the phone and threw it across the kitchen, struck the wall and shattered. Pieces skidding across the tile. The call timer was still counting 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 2 seconds. 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 3 seconds. But the phone was in pieces. The timer continued ticking, even though the battery was yards away. Later, while searching for anything, Mara noticed the floorboards in the upstairs hall had been disturbed. The rug was skewed, and a single nail sat on the wood, pulled clean out of its place. She knelt down and peeled the rug back, revealing a square hatch barely visible against the wood grain. It wasn't locked, just heavy. With effort, she pried it open. Dust and cold air surged up like breath from a tomb, a crawl space. Inside, she found a rusted tin box. It was filled with cassettes, labeled in fading ink. Day 3, the humming started day. 15, Evelyn's mistake, day 28. It imitated my voice, day 44. I almost spoke. Day 57, unlabeled. She took them downstairs and sat beside the old cassette player Evelyn had left on her writing desk. In the quiet, she pressed play on day 15, Evelyn's mistake. Evelyn's voice ragged and whispering. I said his name. I didn't mean to. I was dreaming. I thought he was real. But the moment I said it, the thing outside the door smiled. It didn't have a mouth, but I felt it smile. Pause. Then, ever since then, it won't stop mimicking him. Every night, I hear him singing our wedding song. His laugh is the way he used to say my name. But it's not him. It's never him. Long pause. Then a single line, whispered almost too softly to hear. It gets stronger every time we speak. Mara paused the tape. Her heart beat like a drum in her throat. So this wasn't just about not dying. It was about feeding something. Something that grew with sound. She now understood why Evelyn had gone so quiet. Why the tapes were hidden. Why the mirrors all faced away from the beds. That night, Mara sat on the living room floor with every light. On her journal lay open beside her, its pages filling slowly with written thoughts instead of spoken ones. Rule number 1, silence isn't safe. It's just survival. Rule number 2, it can hear you even when you're whispering. Rule number 3, it knows your voice. As she wrote, the chandelier began to sway again, just barely, like something was moving upstairs. She stayed still. A soft tapping began. At first, it sounded like fingers on glass. Then, it became unmistakably footsteps coming down the stairs. Mara gripped her pen. Don't speak, she told herself. Don't run. Then came the voice, again so close she could feel its breath in her ear. Say something, Mara. She squeezed. Her eyes shut. It didn't leave. Say something. I miss your voice. It sounded like her father. But her father had died in a car accident 5 years ago. Her hand trembled. She grabbed the pen and scrawled furiously in the journal. Rule, -4. It pretends to be the ones you love. Don't believe it. Don't. Answer. She kept writing as the voice moved slowly in a circle around her. Each breath hot and wet, her name stretching longer with each syllable. Mahara. Then, just when she thought she might break, might scream, might respond, it stopped. Utter silence. The chandelier stilled. The footsteps halted. And for the first time since she entered the house, Mara felt something strange. A flicker of power. The silence wasn't just protection, it was resistance. She flipped the journal to a fresh page and wrote a single word. Bold and angry. Note. By the third day, Mara no longer measured time by the sun or the clock. Time passed in noises, in the creak of stairs that shouldn't be creaking, in the soft knocking beneath the floorboards, in the voices that didn't belong to anyone still. Alive, she was learning the rhythm of the house, learning to listen without reacting. It had become a cruel game of chess, where every sound she made was a move onto the house always played black. Mara had stayed silent. Completely no muttered thoughts. No startled gasps. Not even a sneeze. And still, something scratched at the edge of her reality. Something was growing bolder. It started small. At 2:11 a.m., she woke to find her journal open, pages fluttering in an absent breeze. Words were scrawled across a page she hadn't written on. No one wins this game. She slammed the book shut. At 3:17 a.m., the water in the upstairs bathroom turned on by itself. She padded up the stairs on socked feet and shut it off slowly. Silently, the faucet was ice cold. She could see her breath in the mirror. When she turned to leave, second reflection stood behind her. Still, tall, its mouth stitched shut. But when she spun around, the hallway was empty. By daylight or what passed for it through the grime-streaked windows, Mara turned to the crawlspace. She needed answers. She needed rules. There was one tape left. She hadn't listened. 2. Day 57, unlabeled. She hesitated. Then slid it into the cassette player. The voice was quieter than before. It's more fragmented. As if Evelyn had grown weaker. Evelyn's voice halting. They call it the Sound Eater. I read about it once. Old folklore from places that don't exist on maps anymore. It doesn't haunt. It waits. It listens. And every time someone breaks, the silence, it grows. Like mold in the dark. She coughs. Then whispers, I think it used to be human, maybe long ago. But now it's only hunger and mimicry. Sound is food. Voice is power. Our words make it real. Long pause, then one. Final warning, if you hear your name, if it starts using your voice, it's already inside. The tape ended with the faint sound of crying. Mara sat in the quiet, the hairs on her arms priling. It hadn't just been haunting her, it had been learning her. Her voice, her breath, her thoughts. She remembered the phone call, the mimicry.
Ow!
It had sounded like her father. How it had known things only he would say. What if she hadn't screamed that night? What if she'd said his name? She flipped her journal open again, wrote, Rule number 5, it feeds on what it hears. Rule number 6, it remembers what it hears. Rule number 7, your voice becomes its weapon. She spent the next hour taping thick towels along the door, cracks, blocking mirrors, whispering thoughts only in writing. She didn't know if it helped, but it gave her a sense of control. At 6:09 p.m., as the last light of day bled away behind the trees, the doorknob to the front door began to turn. Click it. Twisted slowly. No one on the other side. She backed away and then knock, knock, knock. 3 deliberate knocks. She grabbed her pen. Rule number 8. Don't open the door. Even if you didn't lock it. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in the center of the living room floor, a flashlight under her chin, the cassette player clutched in her lap like a shield. The knocking had stopped, but the whispering began again. Only this time it was coming from inside the walls. Mara. Different voices now, not just her father. She heard her old therapist, her 4th grade teacher, an ex-boyfriend, her own childhood voice. Every version of her life was being played back to her like a broken record. And then, one voice rose above the rest. Hers. I'm not afraid of you. It came from upstairs. Her voice, her exact tone. But she hadn't said it. She hadn't spoken at all. Something was using her now. She covered her ears. Her mouth stayed shut. But something deep inside her gut twisted with realization. It didn't need her to speak anymore. It already had her voice. At dawn, Mara wrote a final warning at the top of her notebook in bold, jagged strokes. Rule number 9. Even silence has an echo, and it's listening that evening. She found a fresh sheet of paper pinned to the fridge with a knife. It wasn't her handwriting, but the ink was still wet. It read, Your move. The house had grown colder than before. The winter air seemed to seep through every crack. But Mara knew it wasn't just the weather. It was the silence itself, thick and suffocating, like a frozen breath trapped inside the walls. She barely slept. Each time her eyelids fluttered shut, voices swirled around her like a cold fog, whispering, calling, begging her to break the silence. But she hadn't spoken in 4 days, 4 days without a sound, and still, the house was not quiet. At precisely 7:03 p.m., Mara heard a soft tap at the front window. 3 taps, her heart stopped. She didn't move, slowly. She crept to the window and peered through the grime. A man stood outside. His coat was soaked from the rain. His face was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, but his eyes dark. Empty pools were fixed on her. He smiled, and then raised a finger to his lips. She, the visitor, never knocked on the door. He only waited outside. Watching, waiting for her to speak. Mara knew she couldn't call for help. She had no phone, no way out. But she could try to communicate without speaking. She grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and slid them silently to the window. She wrote, "Who are you?" She held it up. The man's eyes flickered. He wrote back, "I'm the last one who played the game." Mara's blood ran cold. The man's story spilled out over the next few hours through notes pressed against the glass. Years ago, he'd moved into the house on Hollow Pines Road. He'd ignored the warnings. He'd spoken once, and the house had taken everything, his voice, his family, his mind. Now he was a shadow caught between worlds, cursed to wander the edges of silence, waiting for someone to join him. Don't lose yourself, his last note read. Don't speak. As the rain started to fall harder, the visitor vanished. Into the night, Mara was left staring at the window, the message etched deep in her mind. Silence is survival. Silence is prison. The days bled into one another like shades of gray, each one heavier than the last. The visitor's warnings clung. To Mara's mind, a fragile thread tethering her to the edge of sanity. Don't lose yourself. Don't speak. She repeated those words like a mantra. But the house wasn't content to let her stay silent forever. It wanted. More wanted her voice, her fears, her essence. It had already begun stealing pieces of her. Her dreams had become a jumbled mess of echoes and shadows. Her voices whispered secrets she couldn't understand. Her reflection moved just a fraction behind her. The house was a trap, and Mara was running out of time. That morning, Mara awoke to an unbearable silence. The usual creaks, taps, and whispers were gone. Instead, the house felt empty, hollow, like it was holding its breath. Waiting for something to happen, she sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet. Her throat was dry and raw, a dull ache that reminded her of the last time she'd tried to scream. The memory of that moment was sharp, a flash of panic and cold. Air sweeping through the room, Mara ran her fingers over the journal she'd kept since day one. Every page was filled with rules and warnings, each one a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. Rule number 10. Silence is a shield, but it can't protect forever. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep the silence. Each day, the weight on her chest grew heavier, pressing down on her lungs until every breath felt like a battle. Later that afternoon, Mara heard it again, the tapping at the window. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She approached cautiously, her eyes locking onto the spot where the visitor had stood. But the glass was empty. Instead, taped to the outside of the window was a small envelope, soaked from the rain but still intact. With trembling hands, Mara peeled it off and opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a younger Evelyn, smiling brightly in front of the house, her eyes full of life. But in the reflection of the window behind her, Mara could see another face, a shadowy figure. Standing just behind Evelyn, mouth stitched shut and eyes black as night. Mara swallowed hard. The quiet game wasn't just a curse. It was a legacy. A darkness passed from one player to the next. That night, Mara sat cross-legged in the center of the living room, clutching the photo. The silence was shattered by a sudden, sharp noise. A single word whispered just inches from her ear. Speak. She froze, her heart slammed against her ribcage. The word echoed again. Speak. Mara bit her lip, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to scream, to cry, to tell someone she was scared. But she remembered the visitor's warning. Don't speak. The voice grew louder, more insistent. Speak. Her hands clenched into fists. Then she heard it dash footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming closer, she pressed herself against the floor, willing herself to be invisible. The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then the whisper again. Say my name. Mara shook, her head violently, No, she wouldn't give it anything. For hours, the voice teased her, whispering names and secrets, twisting memories until she wasn't sure what was real anymore. At dawn, Mara found herself on the porch, staring out into the fog-shrouded forest. Her breath was visible in the cold morning air. She wanted to run, to escape the house and the game, but the front door was locked tight, as if the house itself refused to let her go. She looked down and noticed the journal. Lying on the porch steps, she picked it up and flipped to the final page. In bold red ink, a new rule was written. Rule #11. The game only ends when you break the silence. Mara's stomach twisted if she spoke. If she broke the silence, would the house release her? Or would it be the moment she truly lost herself? As the sun rose, Mara made a decision. She would face the game on her own terms. She sat at the kitchen table and opened her journal. She began to write a letter to whoever might find it after she was gone. She wrote about the house, the voices, the shadows, and the unbearable silence. She wrote about the visitor, the cursed legacy, and the terrible price of speaking. And then she stopped because, in that moment, she realized something else. The house wasn't just a prison. It was a mirror, reflecting back the fear, the pain, the loneliness that lived inside her. With renewed resolve, Mara stood up and walked to the cracked mirror in the hallway. She stared at her reflection. For the first time, she whispered, not a scream, not a plea, but a single word. No. The glass rippled. The reflection twisted into something else. Something hungry and desperate. But Mara held her ground. The silence returned, and for now, it was enough. The house was quieter now, but the silence was heavier, almost suffocating. Mara felt it pressing against her skin like a weight made of shadows. Every breath she took was careful, measured, as if the very act of inhaling too deeply would crack the fragile barrier keeping the darkness at bay. She had spoken once. Just a single word. No. And yet, the house hadn't crumbled, hadn't swallowed her whole. It had simply recoiled, like a beast stung by a sudden sharpness. But Mara knew it wasn't over. That evening, as dusk settled in, Mara huddled near the fireplace, the flickering flames casting trembling shadows on the walls. The journal lay open in her lap, but her eyes kept drifting to the cracked mirror across the room. She hadn't looked at herself since the whispered word. The reflection had shifted. Not just a trick of the light. Something else moved behind her image. Something waiting suddenly. A soft tapping began from somewhere deep inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Mara pressed her ear against the cold plaster. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. She traced the sound, moving carefully down the hallway. Stopping before the old linen closet, she reached out and gently placed her hand on the door. The tapping stopped. A low, guttural whisper seeped through the crack. Mara. Hard. The whisper grew into a voice, soft, coaxing, almost familiar. Speak to me. Mara shook her head, backing away. The voice changed, became sharper, more urgent. Speak, please. She bolted for the kitchen, heart hammering. grabbing the flashlight and cassette player from the table. If the voice was inside the walls, maybe the tapes held the key. She pushed the last cassette into the player. The one labeled Day 57 again, Evelyn's. The voice was broken and faint. "It's inside the walls now," she said. "It follows the sound, it's hungry. It knows where your voice hides them when you try to bury it." Suddenly the tape hissed and warped. A second voice cut through low and harsh, almost a growl. "Give me your voice, Mara." The cassette player crackled violently, then went silent. The room plunged into darkness as the fireplace died. Mara's breath came out in ragged gasps. She fumbled for the flashlight, flicking it on. The beam illuminated the closet door slowly. It creaked open. Inside was a narrow passageway. It's pitch black and smelling of damp earth and decay. Mara's heart pounded. But something urged her forward with trembling hands. She grabbed the flashlight and stepped inside. The passage led downward, into the bowels of the house, walls pressed in tight, the air thick and stale. Every step echoed loudly. She felt eyes watching from the shadows. Deeper and deeper she went, until she reached a cavernous room carved from stone. The air was icy cold. In the center was a pool of still, black water like liquid night. Mara felt the urge to speak again, to call out, but she forced herself silent. Suddenly, the ripples spread across. The water a face emerged, not hers, not Evelyn's, a face twisted in agony and rage. Mouth sewn shut with thick black thread, it stared at her with hollow eyes. The thing she had heard about. The sound eater, it spoke without moving its lips. A voice in her head. "You've played my game now, Mara." She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet were rooted. "You cannot escape. Your voice belongs to me." The water rippled again, and Mara saw glimpses of past players' faces twisted in torment, trapped in silence. But then one face smiled. The visitors. He reached out a hand. "Fight it. Don't lose yourself." Mara took a deep breath and whispered, barely audible, "No." The figure recoiled as if burned. The water calmed. A strange warmth spread through her body. She turned and ran back through the passage and into the light of the kitchen. Safe for now. But Mara knew the game was far from over. The sound eater was patient, and it would always hunger for her voice. Mara's victory in the underground chamber was fleeting. The house had tasted her defiance and was furious. The silence she once controlled now felt like a fragile thread, ready to snap with the slightest noise. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, drenched in cold sweat. The shadows in the corners of her room seemed alive, twisting and writhing, waiting for her to slip. For the first time since the game began, Mara allowed herself to close her eyes and remember. She remembered her life before the house, before the silence, before the visitor's warning. She saw her father's face, smiling warmly, the way he used to laugh after a joke. She remembered the day he died, the sudden crash, the shattering glass, the unbearable silence afterward. How she had screamed, then screamed for help, screamed for him to come back, and how no one had answered. That scream had haunted her now. The house was mocking her pain, twisting it into this game. Her voice was a weapon and a curse. Mara got out of bed and approached the cracked mirror again. Her reflection stared back, weary but determined. Then, something moved behind her in the glass. A figure familiar, yet twisted. It was Evelyn. But not the Evelyn she knew. This one's eyes were sunken and black, her mouth stitched tight. Evelyn's. Ghost reached out through the mirror, silent but desperate. Mara pressed her palm to the glass. Suddenly a whisper filled the room. You are not alone. The day passed in a haze of fear and hope. Mara found scraps of old letters and photographs, hidden beneath floorboards, evidence of those who had played the game before. Each one was a story of silence and loss, of voices stolen and lives shattered. She realized the house wasn't just a prison. It was a shrine, asterisk, a monument to all those who had fallen to the Sound Eater. As night fell, Mara sat by the fireplace, clutching her journal. The visitor's words echoed in her mind. Don't lose yourself. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for her soul. Suddenly, the air shifted. The shadows lengthened, and from the darkest corner of the room, a soft voice spoke. Not a whisper, not a demand, but a plea. Help me. Mara's breath caught. She looked toward the voice and saw Evelyn's ghostly figure standing just beyond the FIRELIGHT. Eyes filled with pain, mouth still sealed. The two women locked eyes, and in that moment, Mara knew the game had changed. It was no longer just about silence. It was about saving those trapped within it. The room felt colder than ever. A sharp chill gnawing at Mara's skin despite the crackling fire. Evelyn's ghost stood before her. Fragile but undeniably present, a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness. Mara wanted to ask so many questions. Why was Evelyn trapped here? How long had she been a prisoner of the Sound Eater? Was there a way to save her? But Evelyn's lips remained sealed, stitched tight by some unseen force. Frustrated but determined, Mara reached out and touched Evelyn's hand. It was cold, almost like glass, and then the stitching began to unravel, slowly, thread by thread, until Evelyn's mouth was free. She whispered, voice trembling, "It's inside me, just like inside you." Mara felt a shiver run down her spine. The Sound Eater didn't just trap voices outside. It could imprison them inside a person, consuming from within. Suddenly, Mara's throat burned with a fierce urge to scream, to break. The silence forever. But Evelyn's eyes warned her. Not yet. The ghostly woman gestured toward the door, beckoning Mara to follow. They moved through the house, descending deeper into the shadows. The walls seemed to close in tighter, as if the house itself was aware of their rebellion. They reached a room Mara hadn't seen before, a small, dusty attic with faded wallpaper and cracked floorboards. On the wall hung dozens of photographs, faces frozen in time, eyes wide with terror. Each face belonged to a past victim of the game, and in the center, a mirror that swallowed the light. Evelyn stepped toward it. Reaching out her hand, the glass rippled like water. From its depths emerged a figure, a young girl, no older than 10. Her eyes pleaded for help. "Please," she whispered, "don't let it take me." Mara's heart clenched. This was no longer just her fight. It was a battle for every lost soul. Trapped by the Sound Eater, she realized then That silence wasn't just protection. It was the key to freedom. If she spoke too soon, she would doom them all. Evelyn turned to Mara, voice steady now. We have to be stronger. We have to stay silent until the end. Mara nodded, swallowing her fears. She knew the price of breaking the silence, but she also knew that one day she would have to face the Sound Eater head-on. Until then, she would play the quiet game. Mara woke to a silence heavier than any before, as if the entire house was holding its breath, waiting. The air was thick and cold, settling into every corner like a dense fog. She lay still, heart pounding against her ribs, every nerve alert. Her throat felt raking with the hunger to speak, to scream, to cry out. But she forced herself into stillness, into silence. Clutching the journal tight against her chest, the weight of the quiet game pressed down on her days earlier. She had felt the faintest warmth of hope after meeting Evelyn's ghost, but now, the hope felt fragile, a flickering candle in a vast, dark tunnel. The house had grown restless, its hunger for sound sharper, more desperate at times. She heard her own voice echoing, mimicked and twisted from places unseen, calling her name, begging her to respond. Mara, speak. It's okay. 1. Night. Mara sat huddled beneath a threadbare blanket. The cassette player whispering Evelyn's fragmented voice. It listens, waits, learns, but it fears one thing control. Mara's fingers trembled as she scribbled in the journal, Rule, #12. Control your voice. Control yourself. Suddenly, a soft tap began at the window. 1 tap, then 2, then 3. She froze, staring at the glass. The visitor had returned. She pressed her hand against the window, breath fogging the cold glass. The visitor's eyes, deep and haunted, met hers. He held up a single word on a scrap of paper. Remember? Mara's mind raced. Remember what? Then, the tapping changed to frantic Morse code, pounding against her soul. She grabbed her journal and frantically wrote, "What should I remember?" Seconds passed. Then the visitor's reply appeared. Your name, your truth, your voices, yours to keep if you choose. Mara sank back, overwhelmed. The game wasn't just about silence. It was about choice. Could she hold on to her voice without losing herself? Or would the Sound Eater consume it no matter what? That night, Mara dreamed of the pool in the cellar. The water rippled with voices, faces trapped beneath the surface, screaming. Silently, her own reflection emerged, whispering, "Speak, or be silent forever." She awoke, breath shallow, heart aching. The quiet game was nearing its end. Mara stood at the edge of the dark pool once more. Da 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 da. The icy water swirling beneath the cracked stone ceiling of the underground chamber. The air was thick with tension, as if the house itself was waiting for her next move. She could hear the faintest whisper of voices trapped beneath the surface echoes of the lost. The silence those who had played and lost the game before her. The Sound Eater. That monstrous shadow lurking beneath the water. Hungry for her voice, she clenched her fists, the ache in her throat unbearable. The visitor's words echoed in her mind. Your voice is yours to keep if you choose. But how could she choose when silence felt like both salvation and prison? From the depths, a dark hand rose, fingers like twisted branches reaching for her. The stitched mouth of the creature formed. Silent words. Speak. Give me your voice. Mara's breath hitched. She took a step back, then another. The cold stone floor slicked beneath her feet. She could feel the pressure building, storm of silence threatening to break. Suddenly, Evelyn appeared beside her, glowing faintly. Her eyes, full of sadness and hope, she whispered, "Remember who you are." Mara closed her eyes. She thought of her father's laughter, of the life she once had, of the strength she carried inside. Then she made her choice. She opened her mouth and spoke not a scream, not a plea, but a single word. No. The sound rippled through the chamber, powerful and steady. The water churned violently as the Sound Eater recoiled. Shrieking in silence, the shadows dissolved, the faces beneath the water released. Floating upward like glowing embers, light flooded. The room, warm and healing. The house shuddered, cracked spiderwebbing across the walls. Mara felt the silence lift, replaced by a deep, peaceful quiet, not empty, not oppressive, but full of possibility. As dawn broke, Mara stepped outside. The cold morning air crisped and alive. The visitor was gone, but his message lingered. Silence was a choice, a game, and she had won not by giving in, but by reclaiming. Her voice on her own terms, she walked away from the house. The first words she spoke aloud, breaking the years of silence. The quiet game is over, but the silence isn't. Will you dare to face the shadows lurking in your own mind? Will you hold your voice tight or let it slip into the darkness? If you felt the chill of silence creeping in, if you've heard the whisper just beyond, the edge of hearing, then this story is for you. Share your silence. Tell your story. And remember, sometimes the loudest screams come from those who don't speak at all. Are you ready to play the quiet game? I'm free.